Quorum Radio, baby.
Go down, and their power can come right back up, localized on their local grid.
What's your favorite way of dealing with the whole illumination issue? I mean, are you a big, you mentioned bear grease. How does it stack up with other types of candles and tallows? I mean, is it really, is it slow burn, or tell me more.
The bear tallow or bear grease, as it's normally referred to, is not quite as liquid at room temperature as emu oil. Emu oil is liquid all the way down to about 50 degrees. Bear grease only goes liquid at about 80 degrees. So it's a little bit more viscous, and it has a higher melting point. But again, it's very multi-purpose. Emu oil, it's actually marketed for its health effects, but it's not quite as versatile as bear grease.
Right. No. It sounds like a great.
But it's basically when you make a bear grease candle, it's essentially like a soft candle at normal room temperature, and then once you light the wick, it'll form a liquid pool on top almost immediately, just like a votive style candle.
Oh, sure, absolutely. I know what you mean. Okay, so then, if you have a bear, let's say you get not to go on the bears too much, but I find it pretty fascinating because that's a very important resource to have to be able to illuminate.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, bears are really overlooked by a lot of people because, not only do you have a great source of fats, but you've got a meat it's quite nutritious, and you've got fur that's just amazing. The preferred winter wear for trappers in the Old West was a bearskin jacket. Either bearskin or buffalo robes were like the standard thing to wear because they have heavy fur on the outside, and they're really nice and warm. So you've got a really multi-purpose animal if you drop a bear.
Absolutely right. And so, and in the western states, I mean, do you find more black bears, grizzlies?
Mainly black bear. Some grizzly bears in the high country. We have a few grizzlies where we live, and of course that means when we're packing a pistol, it's more for four-legged defense than it is against two-legged predators. Because we live out in the middle of nowhere, we're really not worried that much about street crime. But if you ever run in with a bear, you want a gun that's going to stop the encounter.
Worse than street crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've been out berry picking a few times where it was kind of a toss-up as to whose berry patch we were in, and if we heard a bear moving around, we would just move on around the hillside. It's like, okay, I think he thinks it's his berry patch. We better get going.
Yeah. So, about that. I mean, do you go into the woods without your rifle?
To really stop a bear, you're going to want to have a high-power rifle or a shotgun.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to say that.
Most handguns are only going to make a bear angry.
Exactly.
My approach, some people carry a great big handgun. They'll carry, a big 450 or 454 Casull or something like that revolver.
Right.
My approach is to carry a 45 automatic and 4 spare 13-round magazines for a Glock. We carry Glock Model 30s, but you can use the Glock 21 magazine, a 13-round magazine in it. I want to be able to put a lot of lead down range in a hurry and keep shooting. So I carry 4 13-round magazines when I'm in the backcountry because I want to be able to have a chance at least of stopping a bear.
Yeah,
generally, with black bears, all it takes is a couple of shots anywhere in the bear's vicinity. They're going to run off and go find someone else to harass. With a grizzly bear, you never know, what's going to happen, and you need to be prepared to fire for effect.
Sure. And so, if you've been charged by a bear a few times, I take it, right?
I've only had a couple of false charges, and I'm very happy to say that, because in a full-on charge, I might not even be able to clear leather before a bear's on top of me. That's worst case scenario. There's a few people that get killed in Alaska every year. In fact, it usually doesn't even make the news in the lower 48 states.
Sure.
Where I live, bear attacks are actually fairly scarce. In the inland Northwest, we have just a few grizzlies. And in fact, most of the grizzlies that pass through our area have radio collars on them. And we'll actually get a warning from neighbors that say, there's a grizzly moving down the valley. Watch out. Keep your animals penned up tonight, because there's a grizzly coming through. So we actually get a little advance warning, because there's not that many grizzlies in the northern Rockies. A lot of them are tracked. In Alaska, all bets are off, because they've got big brown bears, Kodiak bears, and grizzly bear or brown bears practically outnumber people in Alaska. If you're out fishing, you better have eyes in the back of your head when you're fishing.
It's ready at any moment, man. I mean, it's just they're out there. When the fishing is good, the bears know about it.
Yes, they're out fishing too. The good news is the bears, at the time of year when people are out fishing, the bears are out trying to fatten up, and they only have one thing on their mind, and that's packing in the calories. And unless you are in a situation where you get between a bear and her cubs, you're probably not going to have too many problems. Oh,
sure. Yeah, that's the one thing you want to avoid. Now, I want to transition onto another thing, and that's currency. Okay. People have their own idea about what's going to be necessary from the standpoint of being able to purchase things. What's your own view on it? Are you a big barter believer?
I'm a big believer in barter and silver, and my preferred bartering item is standard caliber ammunition. I think in the short term, if things really go south, people aren't even going to want silver. They're going to want lead.
What can you do with it?
They're going to want 45 ACP and 9mm and 357 Magnum and 223, 556, 762 NATO, 762 Russian. They're going to be looking for common caliber ammunition, and if you're sitting on a big pile of it, you basically have the equivalent of a millionaire's bank account.
Oh, amazing.
In a barter situation. You can basically name your own terms for what you want, because ammunition will be scarce. I mean, just look at the last few months. Since March,
you can't get ammo, right?
You can't find any ammo. It's almost impossible to find common caliber ammunition right now. Dealers are literally selling lousy Russian imported steel case ammo and just basically full metal jacket plinking ammo for more than the price they were demanding for premium ammo 4 months ago. That's the times we're in right now.
Astonishing.
Imagine if we had a full-scale socioeconomic collapse, what ammunition will be worth. And who's going to be willing to part with much ammunition, not knowing how long the situation's going to last? If someone has 500 rounds, they may think, my family may need all of that, so they may not be willing to part with any of it.
Oh,
so it's only a few people, like the readers of my blog, who have 10, 20, 30, in some cases, 50, 80,000 rounds of ammunition, who are going to have enough, they're going to have to be beyond their comfort level for their own needs, where they'll feel willing to part with any of it. So it's only going to be a few people that have ammunition available, and they'll be sitting pretty.
Yeah, something you mentioned a number of different munition types. I did not hear you mention 22 caliber. What do you think about that? Do you think it's going to be useful to kill woodchucks, raccoons?
17 caliber and 22 caliber, I think, is what most people should store in the largest quantity. And it's very compact, and of course it's not reloadable, so you want to have a lot of it. 17 HMR and 22 long rifle and 22 Magnum should be stored in large quantity, And again, that'll be ideal for barter. And one advantage of ammunition is it's what economists refer to as fungible, which means any round of 22 long rifle will fit in any 22 rifle, and it's basically traded at the same value, and it comes in boxes of 50. So you're not limited to one transaction with a box of 50 cartridges. That might be 10 transactions of 5 cartridges each to make trades for things like a can of beans or whatever. So it really has great advantages to stock ammunition for barter. It's ideal as far as I'm concerned, and as long as you store it in waterproof containers, it can store for literally for not just decades, but for centuries. I've shot ammunition from the 1890s where every round still goes bang because it was stored in sealed cans.
Was this from the U.S. Army?
Yeah, this was
Navy?
30-40 Krag ammunition from the 1890s, and it had been stored in cardboard boxes inside ammo cans, literally since the 1890s, and every round in that box went off.
Nice.
No hang fire, no delay, nothing. It was just like shooting modern ammunition. Of course, that was corrosively primed ammo, and corrosive primers are notoriously reliable. They have incredibly long shelf lives. But even non-corrosive ammo from World War II, I've shot 30 carbine ammunition and 45 automatic ammunition from World War II where every round goes bang.
Nice.
But by the same token, I've also shot ammunition from the 1960s that was stored in a paint cabinet outside of ammo cans where only about half of it went off because the primers went dead because they were exposed to paint fumes.
Okay. All right. Well, talking military brings me to rations, and I know that you probably had your share of Logan bars that have been around too long that people say,
I've eaten my share of ancient C rations and MREs. I was in the Army back in the 1980s and 1990s, where we were kind of at the transition between C rations and MREs. And some of the C rations that we had were literally 15 years old and not very appealing. Obviously, when people store food, they need to think in terms of regular rotation. Don't store more than you can eat before it reaches the end of its shelf life, or be prepared to donate it to charity and buy fresh, and that gets expensive. So,
right. But isn't it true that some of the D rations from World War II, people still eat them? Or is that yet to be?
The nutritive value has got to be next to nothing. Now, some things like wheat, for example, you can, I have some wheat that I inherited from my mom that was from 1981, and it's still perfectly edible, and it still has most of its nutritive value. Surprisingly, about 20% of it still sprouts. So you can do wheat there.
Wow.
Yeah. This is hard red winter wheat, and it was stored right, and it's amazing how much nutritive value it still has. But a lot of foods, of course, depending on if they're high fat or depending on their acidity or whatever, or in the case of beans can get so hard that you literally need a pressure canner to cook them because they dry out so much that you can soak them forever or cook them forever in a regular boiling pot, and they'll never soften. Once beans are about 8 or 10 years old, they just get so dry. The only way you're going to cook them is with a pressure canner.
Oh, okay. Well, good to know. I guess that's something that people should have, right? I mean, anything having to do with canning is vitally important.
Oh, sure. And ironically, as I mentioned before, we're talking about preppers being teased. Well, one thing that we were teased about was having 800 canning jars. Well, to feed a family of 6 or 7 for a whole year, you're going to need 700 or 800 jars.
Absolutely.
And people said, why do you need so many jars? Well, guess what you can't find right now? Canning jars. You can still find a pretty decent supply of lids and rings, surprisingly. But the jars themselves, because so many people have gotten back into canning recently, they just have no real supply out there. They've all been sucked up out of the market, and canning supplies are pretty darn scarce.
Wow. Well, listen, Jim, I hope we can do this again because I have, in about 7 minutes, I have to interview somebody about 9/11. And he was somebody who was involved in 9/11. He was actually working for American Airlines at the time of the attack. Very interesting guy. So I would love to be able to interview you again to go a little bit more deep into your book, that The Ultimate Prepper Survival Guide, which, folks, there's a special offer at Costco. Buy it now. It's going to be gone within days.
Yeah, Costco only bought 30,000 copies, so I expect those to be gone by about the first or second week of October.
Maybe even before, because the situation where people are looking at not just October, but October before the 2020 election, which is going to be, all bets are off on that, right?
Yeah, all bets are off there. We're living in very interesting times, as the old Chinese curse goes. So be prepared, folks. Stock up, team up, train up.
Absolutely. So again, folks, go to Jim Wesley Rawles' famous website, survivalblog.com. Lots of interesting things on there to get.
Yeah, the archives are freely available all the way back 15 years. There's over 30,000 articles and columns that are all available free of charge. It's all fully searchable. Please, folks, take full advantage of that. It's free. You have no excuse but to get smart.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that's great. Well, listen, Jim, thanks so much for being on Quorum Radio. Hope we can do it again.
Thank you so much for having me on, Bill. God bless you and your listeners.
And God bless you and your family. Thanks so much.